You good? The Village of Hainesville regular board meeting will now come to order on Tuesday, February 10th at 7:04 p.m. If everybody would please rise and I'll lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mayor Linda Soto.
Present.
Trustee Darrenowski is absent. Trustees Crease. Here. Duberstein. Here. Barrett.
Here.
Daly.
Here.
And Honey. Here.
Okay, we are in quorum. I was contacted by Trustee Darrenowski. He is under the weather and will not be with us tonight. Can I have a motion for approval of tonight's agenda?
Second.
Roll call.
Trustees Crease.
Aye.
Duberstein. Aye. Barrett.
Aye.
Daly.
Aye.
And Honey. Aye. Motion carried.
Okay, and then we have a guest presentation tonight. There are no strangers to Hainesville. For quite a number of years now, we have utilized Clark Environmental for our mosquito abatement and control program, and we've had an outstanding relationship with them. And they have another division of their company which involves fountains, and aquatic weed, algae, and aeration. And so we're going to give them the floor. We have George Ballas and Jennifer, your last name again? I apologize. Okay, say that one more time in the mic.
It's Biancalana.
Okay, sounds good.
It's on the screen.
All right, well, thank you for having me tonight. I am Jennifer Biancalana. I'm with Clark.
Can you?
Speak into the mic.
Yeah, so you could take
Just
it
tip
out.
it, yeah.
Take it out or lower. If
Yeah.
you're more comfortable holding it, you can do that.
Just snaps out.
Slides out.
There we go. Well, we're good. We'll just leave it alone.
Okay, that's okay. Are we picking her up?
Are you okay? Can you hear me? I'm loud as one woman.
I think you're okay.
Okay, I'm Jennifer Biancalana. I'm with Clark, and I am one of the mosquito control and aquatic consultants for our company. Tonight I've put together a presentation for you that is an overview of a couple proposals that I've provided to Jeff in the past couple of weeks. One is for weed and algae control services, and the other one is for aeration services.
Do you want the lights dim for your PowerPoint?
As long as everybody can see it.
I think you'll see better. How's that? Is that good for you?
Perfect.
Okay.
So at Clark, we specialize in two different service areas. One is mosquito control, which you're familiar with, and the other is aquatic services. We realized through our over 65 years in business that both of these environments go hand in hand. So if you control your aquatic environment, you're overall reducing your mosquito breeding and mosquito populations. So we also offer aquatic services to provide our customers the whole package. What a weed and algae control program is what we come out and we inspect your ponds that are located within the village. We provide an environmental service program to not only apply products to keep them clean and maintained through the summer, but also to maintain a natural balance in the water body. The way that our program here at Hainesville is proposed is our state licensed applicator will come out on a bi-weekly basis from May through September. They're going to inspect the ponds for any new weed or algae growth. If they find the ponds to be growing, they'll use EPA registered herbicides and algicides to treat them appropriately. Also at every visit we will do basic water quality testing. So we'll take the water temperature, the pH, the dissolved oxygen level, alkalinity, and record all of that data to make sure that we're keeping the ponds healthy. And of course, we won't apply any products if any of those water quality tests come back, not in a normal range. After every service visit, we will email the village with a complete service report. The service report will let you know who was on site, the date we were here, and then it itemizes pond by pond, not only what species were growing in the pond at the time, but what products we applied to the water as well. And then off to the right there, you can see a chart that talks about restrictions. If there's any products that we use that carry a restriction, whether it's an irrigation restriction or a swimming restriction or a fish consumption restriction, it will state it on there. So for example, on line 2 there, we used a product called Reward, and there's a 3-day fish consumption restriction. So if you fish from that pond, you're not going to want to consume that fish for 3 days. So any products that we use that carry a restriction, you'll know about it ahead of time. The second part of my proposal was for aeration here at the village. I spoke to Jeff, and he let me know that you've had fountains in your ponds for years. And through the years, they've broken down, they've mechanically not worked the entire summer, and they cause a lot of headache and a lot of time out of the summer getting out into a boat, trying to pull those fountains back in and repair them. So I've also quoted some aeration equipment for you. So aeration is simply adding additional oxygen into the water body. The way that we do this is through surface fountains for your ponds. These photos show some different examples of fountains or surface aeration for you. Some of them have like tall skinny patterns like a geyser. Some of them have different tiers, and then you have like a low profile one up at the top. So what we really want to know is why do ponds and lakes need aeration?
If you want, you can move the microphone that way.
Yeah. Thanks. So the point of the aeration is to maintain the health of the water body. Fish and plants can't survive on water alone. They actually require oxygen. And there is a natural balance of oxygen in the water, but when you can increase it through forced aeration, you're only going to make that water body healthier. So not only is it beneficial for the fish, but it's going to help to break down all of those nutrients that flush into the ponds, including road oils, road salt, leaves, grass clippings, just any debris that washes in. That aeration is going to help to break that down. Because normally what it does is it flushes in, and then it goes and sits on the bottom of the pond, like down in the muck, and then it just sits there and slowly decomposes. So we're helping to speed up that process and then reducing algae growth. So our aeration service is completely turnkey. We will design the aeration equipment for you. We'll order it, we'll install it, we'll do all the electrical work for you through a licensed electrical contractor. We distribute many of the top brands, and then our team is actually trained by the manufacturers to not only install these units, but troubleshoot them and maintain them all year round. And we can even offer the winterization services. So Jeff and his team are getting out there in a boat in November and trying to pull them back in. We'll do that for you. What I've recommended for you is actually the AquaMaster fountain. It's a really high-end unit. It actually has the longest warranty on the market. It comes standard with a 5-year parts and labor warranty on all of their systems. And most of the mechanical parts of an AquaMaster fountain are actually made of heavy-duty stainless steel, including the top plate, the impeller, and the intake screen. So you have a really high-quality, long-lasting unit. Every fountain that goes into your pond comes with a custom control panel that will have a digital timer inside of it. So you can set them to go on and off whenever you want. Probably in the summertime on a weekday, maybe something like 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. and maybe on the weekends closer to 11 or midnight because people are out later. I've recommended the Crown and Geyser pattern for you. There's many different options available, and I've left you catalogs up on the top desk there. The Crown and Geyser is probably the most popular pattern that AquaMaster sells. It actually offers a 2-tiered pattern. So you've got the nice tall geyser coming from the top, which you can see from a distance away, and then the lower pattern gives you a nice wide spread. So it'll create a ripple effect across a large portion of the water. And then those pictures there depict a daytime view and a nighttime view. And that nighttime one has LED lights on it, which I've proposed for the Village Hall Pond. So these next photos that I have for you are just aerial views of each of the ponds and the design layout that we have proposed for you. So this first one here is of the Village Hall Pond. It's a 0.3 acre pond. So you only need a 1 horsepower fountain to properly aerate it. Again, it'll have the Crown and Geyser pattern on it. And this one will also have LED lights. So it'll be placed directly in the center of the pond, in this rectangle, and the 1 horsepower will very effectively create a ripple effect across the entire pond. So you're not only effectively aerating it, but you'll have a nice size pattern as cars pass by, or even if you're looking out the window at the village hall. The second pond here, the water tower pond, obviously it has that larger open area to the east there. So we would propose a 2 horsepower fountain here, and that's because of the size of the pond. We would strategically place that fountain in the larger section, but centered down that channel there, because we want to make sure that when this pattern moves the water, we want it to get all the way down into that channel, because most likely that channel's pretty shallow, and the water probably sits pretty stagnant. So we want to make sure that this fountain is going to move all that water. The third one here is the Misty Hill East Pond, which of course is in the shape of a T pattern. So ideally the best way to do this is going to be to put 3 smaller fountains in the pond, because if we put one in the center, it's not going to be large enough to reach all of the different fingers. So we've proposed smaller fountains, and rather than putting them in the ends, we've put them more towards the elbows, if you will, of each one of these arms, to ensure that the water is moving all the way to the corners, and then it'll also reach the center where that T connects. And finally is your Stillwater pond. From the information I got from Jeff, this is an extremely shallow pond, so what we have recommended is a horizontal fountain. This is still an aerating fountain. It works just like a standard fountain, but it can operate in a minimum of 16 inches of depth. So in the past, your fountain was installed much closer to the shoreline, and water was spraying into properties, and neighbors, properties, and they were complaining. So this fountain will be readjusted towards the center of the pond, because again, it only needs 16 inches of water, and it'll have a nice 5 horsepower pattern. So we're talking about 18 feet high and about 50 feet wide, and it'll give a nice big pattern and move all of the water in that whole triangle. And that is all I have for you. Do you have any questions?
Jennifer, I have a few questions and just some things I'd like you to go into more detail on. Number 1, the last pond we just talked about, Stillwater. That's a newer fountain, correct me if I'm wrong, because it takes the water from the side, right, not the bottom.
Correct. So a typical fountain, actually, in the photo. So that picture on the top right with the black background, that's a standard fountain. So you have your float that sits on the top, and then the motor housing is just below it. So it sort of sits like a T. And that needs to operate in a minimum of 3 feet of depth. And that's pretty standard for any brand of fountain. What Aquamaster has done is they've created a horizontal fountain, which is that lower picture there. And they've taken that entire motor housing that sticks straight down and installed it sideways. So you've got the float, and then the motor sits just below it. Again, it'll all be below the surface, so you won't see it, but it has a much lower profile, so it's not, straight down into the water.
Okay. And then you can go into more detail, and we won't be offended, of telling us why our fountains that we bought on our own didn't work. We know they weren't powerful enough, and that's why they got clogged a lot.
Yeah.
And we have very limited staff. We have seasonal help at times, but otherwise Jeff's alone. And the problem is, on a busy summer day with grass needing to be mowed and other things, do we want to have them spending the day loading a boat, going out to the middle of a pond, dragging a fountain in, or trying to fix it out in the water, drag the boat out of the water, bring it back to the shop, and then go? It's a whole day. It's crazy.
Right.
So please go into a little detail of why we need the more powerful fountain.
Sure. So the fountains that you have, every fountain is fitted for each body of water, so it's not a one fountain solution. It depends on the size and the shape of the pond, as you can see from my last pictures, because you want to make sure you're properly aerating the entire body of water. All of your fountains are pretty much the same size, and some of them are too small for some of the ponds, and some of them are too big. At the same time, they're all built just like the standard Aquamaster, so even in your shallow depths, you have this long motor housing that's coming off the float. And sometimes it's not going to run in these ponds, specifically Stillwater. Stillwater is also shallow. You only have one spot, which is near the homes, that's deep enough to accommodate the fountain. So these fountains, again, they're longer lasting units, they come with warranties. These are high quality aerating fountains. I mean, you can Google search fountains and there's hundreds of them available online. Not all of them are aerating fountains. None of them come with 5-year warranties. And Aquamaster just makes a really good unit.
Why will, if what we had clogged with great regularity, what's the difference that will prevent the fountains you use from clogging with the same regularity?
So the fountains that you're getting from Aquamaster come with a very large intake screen. It's a heavy-duty stainless steel intake screen, and it's going to block a lot of that stuff from coming in. Leaves, debris, muck, plastic bags, anything that blows into that pond can get sucked through a fountain. Aquamaster has specifically designed their intake screen to avoid those clogs. Now, in the case that something does get clogged in there, the fountain comes with a GCFI protection, so it'll automatically kick off the fountain at the control panel. So rather than the fountain continuing to run and then burning out the motor, because if you don't realize it within the first couple hours, it's going to burn itself out and you're done. And then you either need a new fountain or complete motor replacement. The fountain will actually shut itself down. And again, it'll need to be reeled back in and the clog will need to come out.
But you'll do that.
Yeah, yes.
I understand it conceptually. Okay, it's got a big intake that sucks powerfully. It's going to suck the same garbage off the bottom that we've had to deal with. Isn't it just going to clog and save us money because it shuts down? But are you going to have to get a lot of trips out here for something to clean and then restart?
So the standard fountain, including the fountains that you have in your warehouse, the intake screen is actually at the bottom. So when you install this fountain into the pond, the bottom part is your intake screen. It's basically sitting in the mud and sucking it right up. The way an Aquamaster is built is that can at the bottom is the motor. The fan is above it. So it's not just sucking the muck, it's not sitting in the muck and just sucking it right up. The motor is actually sitting down there. And hopefully most of these ponds are deep enough where the fountain's not actually sitting in the mud. We have a couple feet of leeway. But if not, it's the motor that's sitting there and not the fan.
Okay.
So it's not directly sucking in, the debris.
Jeff, is algae, has that been the problem with what most commonly gets sucked into our current pub?
Yeah, algae, the occasional fish. But Jennifer is correct on that. All of ours, the screens are on the bottom, and they're not as performance-oriented as the ones that they propose to put in, where they just have more of an opportunity to clog. And obviously, none of ours have the control panels in them either. They're direct wire, so if something does get caught in there, we don't catch it.
Well, and I also want to remind everyone briefly that when we decided to try fountains, so to speak, there was some debate on it. Everybody had different feelings on it. And quite frankly, I knew Clark had fountains then, and there were some other contenders briefly. And we decided to put our toe in the water, no pun intended, and take an economic approach. We had vendors in town that do sell some fountains, and so we tried them, and we thought, well, let's see if we can maintain them ourselves. What we did learn is that when they work well, they make a big difference. When they don't work well, they're a pain in the butt. But we also know our residents really like them. And that is something they would like to continue. And I have to be honest, I like them. And after the last summer we had, I'd like to do anything to also enhance our mosquito control, because this is an important part of it. And correct me if I'm wrong, if we're running these aerations and they're working better and helping the, decomposing, we're not going to have as much muck either, right, over time?
Absolutely. You can't prevent muck from forming because it's just made up of all the stuff the retention ponds, they're garbage collectors. So you're never going to stop everything from flowing in, but it is going to increase the speed in which it decomposes and breaks down.
Another thing I want to back to is I saw the word duckweed on an early slide, because there's another pond, the List Pond, which we have the bubble tubing in, and I believe that you thought the bubble tubing was good, but when we brought up the issue of the duckweed, or the green carpet as we call it, your view was no problem, we can make that go away.
Absolutely.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Jeff pointed that out right away. He said the big problem on List Pond is the duckweed. Duckweed is this tiny little plant. It is native in Illinois, but it's a nuisance. It's about the size of a sesame seed, and they spread so quickly that if not treated early, it will cover the entire surface of the pond. That blocks the sunlight from getting in. It can cause algae blooms. It just turns the water into a gross, stagnant pond. And we have a product that we use. It's called Clipper. It's
Called what?
Clipper.
Clipper?
And it's an EPA-registered herbicide that has proven to be absolutely phenomenal against duckweed and watermeal. Both of them typically appear in the same type of ponds.
What was the name of it?
It's called Clipper. And the way that that product works is you actually have to wait for the duckweed to show up because you have to physically spray it. So unfortunately, we have to wait for that ugly duckweed to cover the pond. We'll come out with a treatment. We treat the entire pond at the same time. And it takes about 5 to 7 days, and it will completely kill it off and die, and those little seeds will sink away, and you'll have your nice clear pond back.
Okay.
It's like a miracle product.
So does that mean that it won't come back as persistently, or will the problem remain as persistent? We'll just have to keep...
Yeah, we don't really know where it's coming from. So duckweed can wash in from other water sources. It actually comes in on birds or ducks' feet because they fly from water body to water body. And these little seeds are not, they're not planted in the soil. They're actually free-floating seeds. And if a duck lands in that water and it sticks to their feet or their belly, and then they go and fly to the next pond, they're just transferring it over. And then it spreads so quickly. So you can control it and you can't. If this is a pond that commonly gets duckweed, you may see it for a while. And if it's not washing in from somewhere else, you could potentially get rid of it in time.
Yeah, I think that's the most persistent.
That's the one that has the largest
Didn't do
problem.
it this
Yeah.
year because it was already too late.
Yeah, right. I know we had some challenges with it.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And on that note, going back to the herbicides, you mentioned that there's 2 products where fish consumption is an issue, right? If
There's
for 3
one-
days.
Yeah, there's one product called Reward. It's a herbicide.
Okay.
See, we use many different products. We have many different herbicides and algicides, and each one is best at controlling its own plant. So depending on what's growing in your pond, we're not always going to use Reward when we come out here. It all depends on what's growing in the pond.
Sure. My question is that typically something that would be in shallower ponds? Or can it be used even on, like Brittany Pond is a pretty substantial size. And there are people that do fish in that pond.
Okay.
So I would be more sensitive about that being used. Nobody's ever going to fish in some of these other teeny ponds. Correct me if I'm wrong, Wally, you're my professional fisherman.
The only one would be behind Bighorn, behind the houses there. There's one pond that's a pretty deep pond.
Okay.
Some people would
Yeah.
fish. The only thing is, would you be putting markers out, or would you be putting signs that you have?
A flag
A
or...
flag or something that says, we have just done this, don't fish for the next 3 to 5 days.
We typically don't. The only restriction information that you get is through our service reports.
Okay.
But if there's a specific pond that people are fishing out of, I can certainly make note on our behalf. We have many tools we can use on these ponds. If there's a specific one that you're fishing out of, I can make sure that reward is not being used.
Okay.
Because I believe Grace Lake, when they do Molly's Pond and everything else, they do, they put the little flags around, they say, hey, we just heard, use the herbicides, be careful.
No fishing.
Sure.
And stuff like that.
Good to know.
Until one day or whatever, they give a date.
Well, and your service will be done typically on the same day every other week. So say that it's every other Wednesday, you can pretty much always expect us unless there's terrible lightning.
Now, is this done at the same time our mosquito water testing is done, or is that a separate issue?
That's a separate crew, separate service.
Okay.
That's still running all summer long.
Sure.
But that's on a different time frame than these aquatics guys.
Okay.
So yeah, so we'll be out on a bi-weekly basis. You'll probably see them on the same day every other week.
But the reporting would be similar, so.
Yes, and
I don't know, I want to
you
remind, I don't know if all the trustees are even aware that I and the staff get a report dropped off here. We get emails, I think we forward the emails to you, but we actually get a written report. We know where they were out and what they were doing, so.
And I can do the same thing for you. So whether it's mid-season or the end of the year, I can give you a total report at the end to let you know what was treated, what wasn't, what products were used, what's growing out there.
Okay. All right, any
And
questions?
I have a question,
Yeah.
a mosquito question. I'm assuming that you drive around the neighborhoods, and I know you're down to the Cranberry Lake
path. Do you do something in the ponds that we're talking about?
You know what, I don't want to step on toes. George is actually your mosquito guy.
Mr. Mosquito, take the mic.
Isn't it,
Nice picture, George.